if you don't know what it takes, then that's a little bit like trying to run a marathon when you've never run a 5K before. You're going to burn yourself out really, really quickly. So I think that 6 months for me, at least, is a really spacious, doable, yet also tight enough, compressed framework.
Hi, I'm Kyle Werkerly, Certified Professional Ghostwriter. I'm glad you're listening as I welcome industry experts to share stories of lessons learned the hard way, overcoming professional hurdles, turning experience into actual knowledge, and how to connect with your target audience. This is the Career Challenges Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Career Challenges Podcast, and my guest is Jennifer Locke. Jennifer Locke is an author coach, and business book ghostwriter. So Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you're a business book ghostwriter. And so how did you get started ghostwriting business books specifically?
So the way that it happened was a mix of necessity and serendipity is what I like to say. So the way it began was how far back do we want to go in this story? But I became a mom of twins in late 2015, and it became pretty clear to me that I was not going to be able to enter the workforce due to the difficulty of finding childcare, and I had a weird schedule, and the career I was in, it didn't really justify the expense of paying for childcare for 2 infants, which is pretty large. So at the last minute, I decided that I was going to work from home. Well, I decided I was not going back to work, and then the work from home decision happened later. But then, after a while, when things started to settle down a little bit and my girls got more on a schedule, I said, okay, what can I do? How can I, start a business from home or do something from home, or, begin this, help our family and add to our income? So I started freelance writing, and I took a course on freelance writing that was so helpful. I've always written, and I've written books specifically since 2011. So I come from a fiction writer's perspective, and I'm familiar with the process of writing books. Well, in the process of freelance writing and pitching myself to various places and, getting credits here and there and building up my portfolio, I connected with someone who wanted articles ghostwritten for content marketing purposes, business articles. So, and it was totally serendipitous, just a random tweet that I replied to of how I connected with this client. And so we built a good rapport and a good relationship. And eventually the client said that she would like to write a business book, and would I like to do that? And so my reaction was, well, she said, have you ever done that before? And I said, no, but, I have written books. So we just decided to give it a go. And I realized that I loved the process. I loved inhabiting somebody else's voice and getting to express their enthusiasm and their expertise and package it into a book, which is daunting for a lot of people. But because I'd already been doing that, I found that the skills translated pretty well from fiction to nonfiction. And I just enjoyed it. I liked the long form of it. I like the long project, and it wasn't like a one-off thing that, an article here, an article there, that can be fun, but it was more fun for me to be engaged in like a long-term intellectual project. And that book went on to be published and to be traditionally published, and really helped the branding for this entrepreneur. And, once you have a book, you're in another echelon
Definitely
of what you can do. And so that's how it began, to answer your question of how I fell into it and just discovered that I really loved it. It's a lot of fun for me and marries a lot of my skill sets really well.
Awesome. So, some people will ask, was it a famous person that you wrote for?
No, I don't know. If people think that it's like, Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that, I don't know who would have a ghostwriting book. It wasn't a celebrity that people would know. And so maybe people have the mistaken belief that only, film stars or like politicians or these super, super high
Hmm.
power players have ghostwriters. But in truth, anybody can have a ghostwriter. Um, it's if you feel that you cannot, not necessarily cannot, but there's a lot of reasons why somebody would hire a ghostwriter, like
Hmm.
the process of writing a book is too daunting, or you just straight out don't have time for it.
Hmm.
You want something to up level your business. So a lot of business people have ghostwriters, even though it's obviously their material and their experience and their expertise that the ghostwriter is packaging.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it wasn't, somebody super famous. So,
That's okay.
yeah.
Well, some people will ask, well, who have you ghostwritten for when they ask me? And, at first I was like, well, I can't say. I was like uber professional about it. But
Hmm.
I was like, let me have fun with it. So I told one person, oh, I ghost wrote for Bram Stoker. And I ghost wrote for Mark Twain. And they always roll their eyes at me like, well, if you're going to be like that, well, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
that's unprofessional of me because then I lose business that way because then I'm
Right.
not a true ghost.
Yeah.
Now there have been clients that I've worked for who have openly said I have a ghostwriter and it is Kyle Weckerly, and I've
Hmm.
had referrals and contacts come to me that way because the author will introduce me and say, well, here's Kyle, he's my ghostwriter. I hope you have a great relationship with him as I have. So I'm like, okay, that's their choice, and I'll let them
Right.
have that.
Hmm.
But the moment I say, well, I've ghostwritten for Arnold Schwarzenegger and Hillary Clinton, then
Uh-huh.
that's when it's all going to go down the drain. So
Right. Yeah. Confidentiality and keep, honoring their preferences is so important. And that's why it's so important to find somebody that you trust and have a good rapport with and has your best interest at heart.
mhm,
Yeah, it's huge. Like trust is everything when it comes to that, because you're trusting somebody to take your words and all of your experience and present it in a way that's going to make you look really, really good. And it's
mhm,
also, a bigger investment in their business than you make on a daily basis. So
mhm, mhm.
monetarily and time wise and every which way. So trust is like the number one thing that you have
Yeah.
to have.
Mhm. And so I do feel I need to point out, for legal reasons, I have not ghostwritten for Arnold Schwarzenegger or Hillary Clinton. So I got to
Okay,
say
well,
that just
neither
in
have
case.
I. So,
Yeah, good.
so now
Well,
that's clear.
yeah, Hillary Clinton did admit, I have a team of ghostwriters who have done ghostwriting for me. And when she admitted that, openly during her presidential campaign, a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, duh." Of course somebody would do
Right.
that, just
Uh-huh.
because she's so busy.
Right.
She's working with a lot of people trying to get these policies pushed through,
Hmm.
and it's kind of, oh, what's the word? Paradoxical. If you want to, get into politics to change something, you're actually not going to be doing that thing. Like if you want to change education policy, you're not actually going to be working in education per se as a teacher. You're going to be going to the Hill a lot and talking to people left and right. So, a lot of that work of changing policy and understanding what's happening on the ground probably has to be done by somebody else to do the research. And so that's what a ghostwriter would provide for her specifically, not me, again, for legal reasons. And that's always a point I want to emphasize to authors whenever they reach out to me, is like, well, if we need to do research, I'll be doing that research. We just need to figure out what it is we need to be researching
Right.
specifically. And
Hmm.
that's part of my discovery process as well that I go over with them. And they always seem to think, well, I have to have kind of the book ready to go before I hand it to you. I'm like, well, if that were the case, you wouldn't really
You
need me.
wouldn't need me. Yeah,
Yeah, because
exactly.
when in the way I do it, and I'll ask you this in a minute, but the way I work the process is I have a discovery phase, an organized phase, and then finally the rough draft phase where I actually get to the ghostwriting. And that's basically 2/3 or a third of the way into that project before I even get to ghostwriting itself.
Hmm.
So, the bulk of it is really getting that information out of them, getting the stories, doing the research, making an outline and a synopsis and all that. So there's a lot of work that has to happen before you even get to the book, and that's one of the
Hmm.
services or perks, I guess, of hiring a ghostwriter.
Hmm.
So then, Jennifer, what does your process look like? How do you approach writing a book or ghostwriting a book for somebody?
Very similar
Hmm.
to the way you do it. And it's something that I talk with people all the time whether or not they're hiring a ghostwriter or if they decided they want to do it themselves, because I talk with people who want to write the books themselves as well, and I'm coaching them through that process. So something that people don't realize often is, I think people have this idea that they're just supposed to sit at the blank page and just start writing.
Mm.
And that's never how anybody, well, some people, if you're a novelist and you're a pantser or whatever, what is the term that people refer to people who just literally fly by the seat of their pants and
Yeah.
come up with it as they go. But,
Mm.
where that's a little bit of a sidebar since we're not talking about fiction. But in nonfiction, this is like the most basic writing tip I know that I could give to anybody would be to separate your thinking about the book time and your writing the book time, no matter if you're writing a blog post or an article or even just like a social media post. Separate your thinking time and writing time. And if you're taking on the big project of writing a book, then that thinking time is more streamlined and structured and has to have a lot of support underneath it. So very similar to you, it takes me about, or in the process of me working with a client, we work together for about 2 months. Let's say the broad framework is 6 months. Six
Yeah.
months. So about
Yeah.
2 of those months would be discovering, as you said, what the book is about and really honing in on who is the audience and what is the message and how can we be laser focused on those
Mm.
2 things and really use them as the North Star. And just make sure you're serving your audience and who you're speaking to will guide you as you're thinking about what relevant stories to include or what research is appropriate. And you really it all under the umbrella and make a strong, firm outline where
Mm.
you've established who it's for and what it's about. And that I aim to have that process and that outline process and the interviews done with the client to really pull out some of their best stories and make sure that we're on the same page and that the book is saying what they want to say and going in the direction that they want to go. We
Mm.
try to have that completed by the end of month 2. And
Mm.
then once that's done, it's like the writing is the easy part, probably
Sure.
for you and I who are writers. And
Mm.
then it kind of can just flow once those things are established. But
Yeah.
it's a good chunk of time at the beginning where we're planning and thinking and strategizing and discovering.
Yeah. And I find that if I don't do that process, and like you said, it's 2 months for you, and sometimes for me it's a little longer, just depending on, the author's schedule. But if I don't take the time to do that, when it actually gets to the ghostwriting, if I try to rush it and get to the ghostwriting faster, it's a poorer quality is what I'm producing, because I'm not able to really focus on the writing. I'm like, well, what am I trying to say here? What kind of research do I need to do? Well, maybe I should
Mm-hmm.
do that research before I should write it. Well, if I do the research first, if I do all that organization and kind of the grunt work, quote unquote grunt work,
Mm-hmm.
then the actual writing is so much smoother and clearer and has more efficient, I should say, more efficient writing, because then I'm actually doing the writing instead of doing those other phases that I should have done already.
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing that I would say to that is when I talk about forming an outline, I encourage people, or at least advise them that the outline is, I've never made an outline and stuck to it 100% at
Sure. Yeah.
all, or
Hmm.
even close. Like it's meant to be a flexible living document that changes to the book as you're writing it, but it needs to be there and it needs to be as solid as you can make it beforehand, to really support you in the writing of the book.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And you had mentioned kind of 6 months was your timeline. For me, the average is 6 months as well. And people I think, are always shocked by that you can get it done in 6 months. But for me, I always say, well, that's the average. And the reason why I say the average of 6 months is an average book is usually 200 to 250 pages, and that usually dictates how long I take, which is like 6 months on average. Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, just depends on the amount of work involved. So for you, what kind of makes it a 6 month project?
Well, estimating about the same page length and word count and everything as you were working with. Some people hear 6 months and they think that's really long. And then sometimes people are so like gunning to go and write their own book and they've never written it before. And they say, I'm going to do this and I don't need 6 months. I only need like 2 because they're just like charging at the gate, ready to go. And, but of course, like if you've never done it before, if you're not practiced in the art of writing books, if you don't know what it takes, then that's a little bit like trying to run a marathon when you've never run a 5K before. You're going to burn yourself out really, really quickly. So I think that 6 months for me, at least, is a really spacious, doable, yet also tight enough, compressed framework. I had a post on a few of my social media channels the other day, and I was, because something that I hear from my audience is that they want to know how can I do this? What is the timeline? What would it look like if I were to write a book in 6 months? Or, show me a way that it can be done. Give me a schedule. And so I said, okay, so if we're going to write a 50,000 word book in 6 months, and I basically just walk them through the timeline of that I use. And we said, if you want to write 6 days a week, it would be this many words. If you want to write 7 days a week, it's this many. If you want to write 5 days a week, it's this many. And, the most amount that you would be writing during that time, starting at the end of month 2, after you've completed your outline, I can't remember the exact numbers, but if you only wanted to write 5 days a week, that only amounts to about 568 words a day. Ooh. So when you really break it down and look at the numbers, that's not that much. You can focus in for that small period of time and just keep going. Just keep showing up and just keep going. And that's how books get written. They get written in, the 30-minute increments before your kids wake up, or even, after they go down and in the little cracks of your day. That's when it happens. That's when books get written. So yeah, it's a compressed, yet also spacious framework that allows me at least to break the work up into small bits and get it done.
Want to learn the hard podcasting skills necessary to support your favorite shows? My friends at Podcast Production School have you covered. Their online course is designed to help you master the skills and strategies needed to launch, manage, and grow podcasts for business owners or professional podcasters. They'll help you learn everything from audio editing to show note creation and even marketing and promotion. Listeners of the Career Challenges podcast can also get $100 off when they use the promo code Kyle100 at checkout. That's Kyle $100. KYLE $100. While you're there, download the free podcast production and launch checklist. This resource requires no purchase and gets you started on learning the steps to produce and launch a podcast. Download the free podcast production and launch checklist today. To do that, visit podcastproductionschool.com/workbook to grab yours. Would you like to be a guest on the Career Challenges podcast? Go to careerchallengespodcast.com to find out how. While you're there, check out other episodes and download them through Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. The Career Challenges podcast is hosted by me, Kyle Weckerly. I'm a certified professional ghostwriter who works with business thought leaders and industry experts to write polished manuscripts, assess their publishing options, and create book marketing plans. I've worked with consultants, high-ticket salespeople, coaches, speakers, C-level executives, and business owners. My authors have worked for USAA, Vistage, Booz Allen Hamilton, Austin Technology Council, and Twitch. My authors know that writing a book will help them change the world. They know that the story they tell will create that change. So they want to write a book to serve as a platform for their marketing endeavors. They know a published book will help them secure more speaking gigs, market their expertise, promote a product or service, and more. So reach out to Kyle Weckerly at weckerlywriter.com to start your publishing journey. Maybe you're not ready to start that journey just yet, but you do know that you want to write a book. So where to begin? Well, if you're ready, go to weckerlywriter.com to download 101 questions to ask before writing your book. This will help you get started and will offer guidance on the next steps to turn your ideas, experience, and actionable knowledge into a completed manuscript. Just visit weckerlywriter.com to get your free copy today. That's weckerlywriter.com. weckerlywriter.com. And now, back to the Career Challenges podcast. Yes, you had said that writing a book is kind of like running a marathon. His episode hasn't come out yet, but it will by the time this airs. Armando Cruz, he wrote Leaving a Legacy or Building Your Legacy. I can't remember the exact title right now. So I apologize, Armando, if you're listening to this later. But he's an ultra marathoner, and he wrote a book as well. So it's like awesome that she's bringing that up. And he explained how he did his ultra marathon training and all that. It's ridiculous. Just to hear that, I'm like, man, I'm just tired thinking about it.
Yeah.
But he talked about writing his book, and he said, the first time writing my book, I had the gift of ignorance. He said, I was like, really? He's like, because I assumed I would have it written in 90 days. That was what the goal I had in my head. And then X amount of months later, 4 or 5 drafts later, it was done.
Yeah.
So he was like, I just didn't pace myself. I just didn't know that. And he wants to write a second one. And I think the vibe I was getting from him was that, now that he knows exactly how much is going to go into that process, he's a little hesitant to really jump right in like he did before. So I think he's going to work on pacing himself, pardon the pun there, in writing his book as well. And I talked to him the other day too. He's about to do a 200-mile race. Oh
my gosh.
So I was like, why? Someday I'll get up to a marathon, but right now I'll just stick with half marathon.
Right. I feel so. Yeah, I always feel that I use that example a lot of like, don't try to run a marathon if you've never run a 5K. But I should be clear. I've never run a marathon. I've only run a 10K. But I've never met anybody who's written a book and been like, oh, that I did that so much faster than I thought I did, or that whole process was so much faster than I thought it was going to be. That's just not the case. So the sooner that you kind of accept that it's going to take longer than you think it will, especially if you're trying to do it on your own and you've never done it before, and whether or not different self-publishing versus traditional publishing, there's different timelines for all of that too. But just if you don't think it's going to happen super fast, then you're not setting yourself up for as much frustration.
Definitely. Awesome. So with ghostwriting, and you're kind of doing the writing for them, of course, as a ghostwriter, what are, I guess, the similarities and differences for you when you do a coaching project as opposed to a ghostwriting project?
Well, when I'm coaching authors, the work that we do in the beginning is very similar in terms of getting really specific about who the book is about and what it's for. And it really is that discovery process where we're just really looking to be as specific as possible and draw out the stories that are going to have the most impact and build the outline in a way that's really supportive of the author. And so rather than me write it for them, that's when I work with them. And so we have a timeline. We still use the framework of 6 months. and we work to have the outline completed by the end of month 2, just like I do when I ghostwrite for clients. But I'm providing weekly support through email and helping them get to that place where they can do it on their own and feel secure, and, you know, supporting them with anything that they need as they go through that. And we also have a monthly call where we're talking about any issues that are coming up. And then once they begin the actual drafting phase, then they're sending pages to me if they so choose, so they can get my feedback or either feedback with editing as they go. And we make the outline and we agree on the schedule that says we're going to have this written by then, we're going to have this written by then. And then it's up to them to really keep to that schedule. And the hardest part for people, I think, is making the time and figuring out when they're going to do it. But it really is on them. And, you know, no matter if you're having it written for you via a ghostwriter or if you're writing for yourself, you have to be totally committed to do it. You know, no matter who's writing it, you've got to be committed to the project. And, you know, understanding that this is likely going to be a bigger project than you've taken on in other aspects of your life. You know, writing a book is not something you just do every day. So you've got to be totally committed, no matter who's writing it. So yeah, but that's the process. So it's, you know, making the outline, holding their hand through that, supporting them, and then making the timeline for them to get it done. And then it's on them to do the writing. And I provide weekly support through email and also monthly coaching calls as well. And it's like hand holding and support, and also giving feedback and guidance on not only the work, but different publication paths they might want to pursue.
Yeah. And do you run into this as well? Every time I talk with somebody who's even vaguely interested in writing a book, there's always the writing process, which we go over in depth. And then when I start talking to them about publishing, I always start with saying, you know, self-publishing or traditional publishing doesn't matter. You're going to have to do the bulk of the marketing on your own. Mm-hmm. And they all just kind of look at me like, what? Like the traditional publisher's not going to do it for me? I'm like, they'll probably do some for you more than a self-publishing path would, but really most of it's on you. Mm-hmm. Is that, do they look at you in surprise as well?
Yeah, I think that's such a, that's like, oh, I'll get a publisher and I'll get a book deal and then it's all done for me. And, that's not the way it goes for anyone. Pretty much, like, no one has that kind of setup. But, entrepreneurs are so poised to do that well because they're so used to talking about what they do and talking about their work and sharing it with others. So, hopefully that part comes naturally, and that's primarily who I work with. But, figuring out that ahead of time, what's the game plan? What's the end game? How are you going to promote this? How is this going to align with your business model or help you pivot in a direction that you want to go? Just helping people think through that so they can begin with the end in mind and really know what they're working towards. Because when you can see the end picture, that will help you, continue through this big process that you've got to show up for and be totally committed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a previous guest of mine, Casey Demchuk, he does a lot of book marketing copy for books, writing the back cover and a bunch of stuff on the website. And he says a lot of his authors will think of their marketing even before they start writing their book.
Yes.
And that kind of surprised me because I always assumed you would want to wait till after you were done with the book. So do you find your authors are more or less waiting till the book is done or the manuscript's done, or are they thinking about marketing even before they're writing?
I think they're thinking about marketing even before they're writing, and they're, where are they going to promote this? How is this going to align with what they're doing? How, they might have a career as a speaker that they're working to develop and give more legs to. So they've already got those things kind of in place, and the book is a way to support that, which is totally what you should do. No matter what the book is, no matter what your goal is, it's good to just begin with the end in mind and think about what are your goals for doing this, because it's way too easy to stop otherwise. Yes. It's way too easy to say, like, you know what, I don't have time for this. I'm gonna I'll come back to it next year, or maybe another year. There's never going to be a right time to write a book. The time is never going to be there. You have to just believe in it and be committed to it, and believe in what it can do for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. So with self-publishing and traditional publishing, I guess which path do you kind of lean towards? I mean, what is your preference if it was up to you entirely for a book? What would you choose?
Phil, so I always say that it doesn't matter, and I think that is the truthful. Like it really is a matter of what your goals are, and also knowing what's going to be your job if
Mm-hmm.
you are doing it. So if you're a self-publisher, I've heard this. This was not original to me, so I can't claim it. But somebody who went down that path really referred to herself as a project manager,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a great way to think about all of the elements that you are coordinating and organizing. It could be a ghostwriter, a book formatter, a book marketer, if you want to help someone to help you with that specifically, and what are your distribution methods, and what is your platform that you're going to use, and proofreaders and editors, and all of those pieces, all of the, if you had a publishing house, that would just all be there for you and you wouldn't have to assemble that yourself. But if you're self-publishing it, then you're the publisher, so it's you're organizing all of those elements together. And if you have the patience for that, and the time, and the investment, because it can be quite expensive, and you just need to get an idea of those expenses going in. The benefit is that you can coordinate all of those, and you're the boss basically. So if you want to launch a book to coordinate with some specific element of your business or something else that you're doing, you can control those things. You can control the timeline. If you are going traditional publishing, you're going to have way less control over the
Definitely, yeah.
timeline, both for if and when, the book were to be under contract, and when the publisher's timeline is, you just have less control over the whole aspect. But of course, the benefit is that you do have a publishing house behind you, and all of those professionals are hopefully in place. So it just totally it depends. How's that answer? It totally depends on what your
Sure.
goals
It's
are.
a very professional answer
Very
to
diplomatic,
say. Yes, very diplomatic.
yeah.
Good call on that. Good call. And
Mhm.
when this episode airs, hopefully by then we'll be past the main peak of the coronavirus pandemic. And I know as we're recording this, things are really up in the air as far as the economy is concerned, and books and publishing. A lot of the big publishers, they're working from home, or they're trying to, work as little as possible. And book
Mhm.
launch dates are getting pushed back. And so it is kind of creating this pause in the publishing world, and not just there, but all over. But we're going to focus on the publishing world here. And that, stuff's not going to happen. And I think a lot of people are looking at that as another excuse to not write, because they're like, well, publishing houses aren't going to be taking any submissions right now. And when people say that, I'm like, well, yes, that's right now. But do you have a book ready to go right
Right.
now? And so it's like, utilize this time now when you're
Yeah.
probably going to be at home, and
Mhm.
or trying to avoid, with social distancing and all that, and
Mhm.
use this time to get that book ready, so that when they do start taking submissions again, you're ready to go.
Mhm.
Even if you finish the book and they're not quite ready, you're ready when they're ready, and that puts you in a better position. And of course, there's going to be this kind of gap in the publishing schedule, or the launch schedule, for these major publishing houses. And even in the self-publishing world, there'll be a gap, or there'll be more opportunity for you, because you'll have that product ready to go. And so what I see happening, and I'm trying to push this out on social media as well, is that when we do pass this phase with the coronavirus, because China's already passed it by the
Mhm.
time we're recording this, so I do see that there's an end to it. I'm just not sure exactly when that's going to be, because I'm no professional in that field anyway. But it's like, it's there. If we just
Mhm.
take the opportunity now, and I know everyone's scared, I'm scared too, but it's like we have the opportunity to do that, and it's a perfect time now to start thinking about that. And so I hope people listening to this are thinking, oh, this would be a great time to really start writing my book, and hopefully hire a ghostwriter like Jennifer or Kyle. And that way, when they do have that push for new material, there's going to be not necessarily a surplus, but a bunch of people ready to go with new books, and they can jump on that and just seize that opportunity that's going to be coming down the pipe.
Yes, totally. And I want to say something that, at risk of seeming like I'm contradicting myself from earlier when I said that you have to begin with the end in mind and think about what you want your book to do for you and what your goals are. So on the flip side of that, you don't want to be saying, so I see people get so up in their heads about, will this get a book deal? And will this do this? And will this make the New York Times bestseller? And, what is my mom going to think about me? And what are my church congregation that I grew up with going to think about me if all of these things? Or publishing houses aren't accepting proposals right now, so I can't even start. So if you're looking for a reason outside like that, be it the virus and publishing houses slowing down, or anybody else's opinion, or I can't get a huge book deal from this, so why even start, or whatever, there's always going to be a reason to keep you from writing. But if you want to write a book, I fully believe, or if you want to have a book, I fully believe that the means are available to you, whether it's you writing it yourself or whether it's hiring a ghostwriter or hiring a team. So it really doesn't become a question of virus or, time. What I don't have enough time is something people say a lot. But if we take all that away and we just focus on, okay, do you want to write a book? Are you committed to it? Then why not, as you said, use this time that we have where everything is sort of on pause? Why don't you just do the thing that you are desiring to do, which is to write, or at least make a start on your book? And even if it's just a tiny start, even if, who knows when, by the time this airs, I don't know what will be going on in the world and where we'll be with this. But if I could get a message to, no matter what is going on, it always applies. How can you make a tiny start toward it right now? Even if you're just grabbing a journal and you're brainstorming and you're writing questions to yourself and thinking about it, even if you're just looking into something, how can you take the first step? Because if you're trying to predict what's happening in the outside world and trying to predict conditions in your own life and how people will react to it, that really is, I believe, just the voice of fear talking. And you don't want to allow that voice to keep you from doing the thing that you're desiring to do, which is write a book or have a book. So I think if you have the desire, then the means are available. It's just a matter of figuring out what is the best path for you and taking that step and being fully committed to seeing it through.
Awesome.
That's my pep talk.
Yes, it was a great pep talk. I loved it. Now I want to go write, because I've written and self-published a couple books, and so I always want to talk with other authors about their writing experience and why you chose to write about what you wrote, why you chose to write about what you wrote about. That's what I meant to say. So Jennifer, what's your book about, and then why did you choose to write it?
Oh, well, so my books that I write personally, so I write middle grade fiction. So that's a little bit of a different fiction world that we're talking about. I have a book that I'm working on now that I'm really in love with, and it's a friendship breakup story. So it's a dual point of view friendship breakup story between girls who are entering adolescence, entering young teenage, and it's about the first time you lose a friend and how that can really be heartbreaking and traumatic, and how you begin to heal from that and move on and learn and grow, and how that never really leaves you. So that's my kind of home, and my passion is middle grade lit. And that is just because, I read voraciously as a kid, and I read anything I could get my hands on. And I said,
Hmm.
that's what I want to do when I grow up. So that's my home. And I just love, what we're talking about, nonfiction, and that's how I serve my clients. But and from my own heart, I love fiction writing the most. And I find, interestingly enough, that there's a huge crossover, because fiction is so much about voice and how can you make it engaging and exciting for the reader. And in nonfiction too, even though people don't always identify it as such,
Hmm.
we're wanting to be captured. We want our attention captivated
Hmm.
by the voice of the author. And so that's way more important, I think, than anything else, is having that strong voice. So I think really exploring voice and playing with it in fiction allows me to identify it when I work with clients, and really pull out what is their voice, and how, identify what it is about them that's going to be captivating to readers, even if it's nonfiction. Sometimes people say, like, oh, I don't do creative writing, I write nonfiction. Have you ever heard that
Hmm.
before? And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. There is no,
Yeah.
we don't have to
It's
make these
just,
delineations.
yeah, it's really more in the mindset, I think
Right.
is what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you also have an email course that you offer for free, and it's about how not to write a boring book.
Yeah.
So I mean, have you run
Uh-huh.
into boring books? I guess I should ask.
Well, you know what? I have, and usually at this point I don't finish them. And I read a lot of
True.
books, and I mostly finish them. Yeah, but that's so interesting. People think sometimes that because they write nonfiction, that, like, or they'll say, well, my topic is really boring.
Mm.
And I'll say, well, are you boring? No. And most people hopefully would not classify themselves as
I hope not.
boring. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what the course is really all about. So how can you write a book that's going to be in your own style, and is going to sound like you, and it's going to be exciting for you to write and exciting for the readers to read? Because if you
Mm.
have that energy, and you're really communicating, you want to write a book because you have all this experience and all this expertise and passion, and you want to reach a wider audience. So, people think, oh, it's boring, or that's another limiting belief people have, like, nobody would want to read this. Well, if it's important for you and you want to reach a wider audience, then it's going to be, let's make the book as compelling as you are. Let's find the way in that's going to reach your audience and keep them turning the pages. So that's what the course is about. So how they can engage and find that authentic excitement and the thing that's going to hook their readers, so that they write a book that sounds like them.
Hmm. Definitely, definitely. So then, let's flip the script here a little bit. You really love writing fiction. If you had to write a nonfiction book, what would you write?
Oh boy. Is it too meta to say write a book about writing?
True. Like, like Stephen King's On Writing. That's
Yeah.
that's such a prolific book about writing, and everyone refers to that. So yeah, definitely a book on writing. We do need more books on writing.
Yeah, and I love, like, motivational books. I love memoirs. I love books that are, kind of like spiritual memoirs, things like that. Maybe one day I'll write a memoir. I would have to, like, overcome some of my hangups and my limiting beliefs if I were to do that. But I do love to read those things.
Hmm. Yeah, because you had mentioned Curtis Sittenfeld. Am I saying that right? Sittenfeld,
Yes.
and then
Uh-huh.
Elizabeth Strout. Are
Yes.
they your, I guess, your favorite nonfiction authors?
They're actually fiction
Oh, okay.
fiction authors. Yeah, and those were just two of the ones that came to mind. I have so many favorite authors, but yeah, they just write human stories so well that are funny and touching and stay with you for a really long time. So Elizabeth Strout wrote Olive Kitteridge and Olive Again, which just came out. And Curtis Sittenfeld wrote You Think It, I Say It, which is a really great collection of short stories. She wrote a book called American Wife and a book called Eligible, which is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. They're just great. So they capture the human condition so well. So they're hugely enjoyable to read.
True. For a while, I was really into Chuck Palahniuk. He wrote Fight Club.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I really liked his style, which was more, he calls it a minimalist style. I feel it's more of a stream of consciousness style of writing. And the reason why I like that is because it wasn't so much I did this, I felt that. It was, here is my emotions and feelings in a pseudo-sarcastic way, which I thought was really a cool approach to do. And so, I've tried to adopt that, but also I think because I read so many other authors that I'm not able to really embody his writing style, which is, I guess, a good thing because, we don't need another Chuck Palahniuk. We need, unique voices.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but there's some famous author who gave the writing advice of to learn how to write, she just literally transcribed some of the words, pages from the books of her favorite authors and just kept going. And then I think she would transcribe it from the authors and then continue and, then stop and then it's her and keep going. So maybe that's something to try.
That's probably a really good writing exercise.
Right? Yeah, it's interesting. It could be fun.
Finding Forrester. Did you ever watch that? Finding Forrester with Sean Connery.
Oh my gosh, I think I did. Yes.
Yes, I remember watching it in theaters, which is probably dating me. But
no, I think I did too. So
yeah, so he's like a famous author, and he's mentoring this kid, and he's telling him, okay, now sit down and write. And he won't do it. He's so anxious to start. And so he just puts his book in front of him. He's like, here, start with this. And the kid starts typing. And then, that's when the ideas flow. And of course, you hear Sean Connery in his Scottish, you're the man now, dog.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I remember that.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, that's a great idea. And that worked in the movie. And, of course, really set him up for great writing stuff. So it's like, man, maybe I should do that. And then maybe Sean Connery will say, I'm really good at this.
Yeah. Anything that helps you get out of your own head and get out of your own way, it's like you're writing somebody else, you're in the flow, you're in their headspace, and then you can just keep going. Anything that helps you get out of your own way is worth trying.
Definitely. Awesome. So we're just about out of time here, but Jennifer, if people are listening to this and they're thinking, well, I've got to get her free email course so that I can not write a boring book, and also to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes, you can go to my website, jenniferlockewrites.com, and my email course is there for you. I love my email people. Those are my favorite. So I'd love to see you there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Locke. I'm also on Instagram, Jennifer Locke Writes, and on my Facebook page, Jennifer Locke Writes. So yeah, I'm all over all of those. So any of those places are great.
Good. Awesome. Well, Jennifer Locke, thank you so much for being on the Career Challenges podcast with me today.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Career Challenges podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Career Challenges podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Visit careerchallengespodcast.com for more information. And if you really like me, then you'll write a review. And don't forget to pick up your free copy of 101 Questions to Ask Before Writing Your Book by visiting weckerlywriter.com. That's WECKERLYWRITER.com.